Hey everyone, Seth here from the Horror Syndicate, and this is another episode of BrundleFly's Rankings and Reviews. And today I am going to be ranking the Halloween franchise. I'll be doing all 11 films in the franchise. Um, I have a couple warnings before I begin. First off, this video is most likely going to be a little long because I am very passionate about the Halloween franchise, and I don't feel like it would do it justice for me to just kind of give a very simple one sentence explanation of how I feel about each film. I do have likes and dislikes for each film in the franchise. So I will be going to a little bit more detail than normal. So this is probably going to be a little long. The next warning would be that I did not check in with the film ambassadors of the internet to make sure that this was the correct ranking or the correct choices. I felt like being a little rebellious here, so I decided to tackle this as if film rankings and opinions were subjective. I know it's not heard of, but I just wanted to make that clear. It's pretty experimental here. I'm going to pretend like I have my own free will and my own opinions, and they may not match the correct opinions and rankings out there, and I just need to forewarn you guys about that. So, and the last thing I want to say before I begin is that with including Season of the Witch into this ranking, I'm going to do it a little differently than normally. In fact, I've never done it this way before, and I haven't seen anyone else do it like this before, but trying to do a ranking of the Halloween franchise with Season of the Witch included, it can be a little tricky exactly to know where to place it. I know how I feel about the film, but can I say that it's objectively better than one of the Myers sequels? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it, I'm going to pair it up with another movie in the franchise. So there's going to be, at one point in this ranking, there's going to be a suffix, a number A and a number B, just because of how I feel about Season of the Witch, and just because I also want to give an accurate ranking of how I feel about the Michael Myers films in this franchise. So I just kind of want to put that out there. I think it's time to begin. I'm going to start off with number 10, and that's going to be Halloween Resurrection. So my problem with Halloween Resurrection is mainly that I cannot buy what they are trying to sell me, and I feel like I need to go a little deeper into that mindset. It mainly has to do with how they decided to kind of continue on from the H2O continuity based on the way that Halloween H2O ended. And I'm also going to kind of give a little bit of like behind the scenes sort of information. I'm sure there's a lot of Halloween fans who already know all this, but just in case there are people out there who may not know, because I feel like this behind the scenes information really kind of lines up with why I don't feel like Resurrection works. Now I know that Halloween Resurrection, I've actually seen recently, there are some people who do like the movie, and all power to you. I'm not going to judge you. I don't expect people to hate a movie that I hate, or to only like a movie that I like. So, if you're one of the people that likes Halloween Resurrection, I got no problem with that. What I'm going to be saying here is just the reason why I don't particularly like it, why it doesn't quite work for me the way it should. So the big thing here is the ending of Halloween H2O, right? So basically, at the end of Halloween H2O, Laurie chops off Michael's head. And it's explained in the beginning of Halloween Resurrection that at some point between the time that Lori kind of knifed Michael off the balcony and LL Cool J dragged her away. Michael had awoken. He had grabbed a hold of a paramedic, crushed his larynx, and then swapped uniforms with him. And so basically, the guy at the end of H2O was allegedly, he was an innocent man, just a paramedic. See, that doesn't work for me because clearly when you watch the end of H2O, Chris Durand is acting like his interpretation of Michael Myers, right? Because sure, Chris Durand did a little, did some movements a little differently than the Michaels that we've seen in the past, the stunt actors we've seen in the past who played the character, and but the way he played it at the end was very consistent with how he played it throughout the entire movie, and I feel like it's also a little idiotic because there are other ways to communicate besides just speaking. Body language is very telling. And there's multiple ways he could have communicated to Lori that, hey, I'm an innocent man here. For starters, so let's take a look at how H2O ended. So basically, Lori hijacks the coroner's van and she takes it, and while she's driving, Michael in the back in the back of the van is in a body bag, and you see him kind of slowly rise up and kind of tear himself out of the body bag, and then he lunges at Lori, and she eventually slams the brakes. He goes off the windshield, rolls over a couple of times, sits up exactly like Michael Myers every time he gets knocked on his ass. And then she charges the van at him. He stands there. It connects with him. The van goes over the edge of a cliff and rolls over a few times. Lori and Michael go elsewhere. And then he gets pinned between a tree. And then just as Lori goes to take the swing at him with the axe, he kind of does this thing where he's like kind of shocked. Now, if you look at that from the perspective of, I hate to say reality because obviously this is fiction, right? It's not supposed to be reality. We're supposed to take a little bit of leap of faith, but this is kind of it goes a little beyond just a leap of faith for me. So he could have done if it was an innocent man instead of Michael. He could have done various different stuff. He could have pulled off the mask. He could have signaled with his arms. Anything to try to get her attention, but instead he lunged at her. Instead, he went out the windshield and he set up just like Michael Myers, which, Michael Myers, there's always that sort of thing where it's like they kind of teeter on the edge of supernatural with him. Is he man or is there something else to him? If that was a normal person, even in context with the series and with everything that came before, he probably wouldn't have been sitting up. He probably would have been rolling on the ground. He probably would have been unconscious. And then let alone he sits up and then plays chicken with the van, which I don't think someone in their rightful mind would do. They would, if he was semi-conscious, he would probably try to signal that he, to Lori that he is not who she thinks he is. So it's just one of the dumb things with the movie, and some people take that leap of faith, and I guess understand why. And I've seen some people even try to say, well, that was the plan when they made H2O. Not quite. So kind of, but not quite. Let me just put it that way. So if you watch the 2-part documentary, Blood is Thicker Than Water, which was on the H2O Blu-ray put out by Scream Factory, and if you don't have access to that particular Blu-ray, that 2-part documentary is on YouTube, or at least it was. I revisited it probably a couple months ago because it is actually a really good. It's a really good and interesting behind the scenes thing considering how many issues they had with that movie. But that's beside the point. So basically, there was two different factions working here. So the creative side, you have director Steve Miner, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, you have even the writers, and the crew members working on the film. They wanted this particular ending where this was where Laurie Strode comes out triumphant. She finally faces her fear and she confronts Michael and kills him once and for all. And the Akkads, the other side of the spectrum here, they didn't want that to happen, obviously, because the Halloween franchise and Michael Myers is their bread and butter. It's what continues to, finance, I guess, Trancas International. And that's not a bad thing. I totally understand where the Akkads were coming from, because that particular ending does kind of make it hard to come back from that. This, while H2O itself did kind of ignore the previous movies, that was still kind of a little unheard of at the time. So production was put on hold until both parties were happy. And what they did was they brought in Kevin Williamson, the writer of Scream 1 and 2. I think he even wrote the original draft of Scream 4. He wrote Curse, The Faculty, The Following. He created Dawson's Creek. He did a bunch of stuff. He's a very talented writer. But his idea, his solution was very half-baked. Because he came in and he's like, well, what we can do is we can just say that Michael switched uniforms with a paramedic and it was the wrong guy at the end. And that was enough to get both parties to agree enough to resume production, even though the creative side of it had no intention of honoring that. They even actually acknowledged that in that documentary. And so it resumed production and they shot that ending, and they shot it with Chris Durand being consistent with the Michael Myers that he portrayed. It's a really stupid idea because, for starters, when has Michael ever needed to switch uniforms to get out of the situation? He is the Shape. Even in H2O, he is still the Shape. He can always slip into the shadows. There's always, he can always get away in some way without having to pull off some sort of ruse to do so. It just seems very odd and out of character for Michael Myers to feel like he was in a position to where he had to pull a Scooby-Doo or something. He had to switch uniforms. It doesn't make sense at all with the character, and it just doesn't work for the movie. I don't think that idea really works because it really just, the ending of H2O just makes it clear that reason that they give at the beginning of Resurrection was complete and total horseshit. So that's a real tough sell. It's really hard to buy into that excuse because if you see the previous movie, there's no way that was a paramedic. No way whatsoever. Can't buy it. But then the problems with Resurrection continue, and I'm not just talking about Busta Rhymes. The next problem is the treatment of Laurie Strode, who suddenly becomes a very stupid character. So she sees him outside the asylum that she's in. She pretty much sees him come into her room, take a couple stab at the pillows that she has set up to make it look like her. She hits him over the head with a fire extinguisher, and he chases her through the corridors up into the roof. And there's several times where she kind of turns around and sees where he's coming after her. So in that time span of her running up there to the roof, how could she think that, oh, this is just someone, this is just the wrong person? It makes even less sense than the H2O thing, because I mean, the, in H2O, you could say there was a period where she lost track of him, right? So between the time that she knocked him off the balcony onto the table, um, and to the time that she hijacked the coroner's van, anything could have happened in that period of time. Whereas the beginning of Resurrection is pretty instant of him stabbing at her bed and following her all the way up to the roof. And then, of course, then there's the whole thing where she gets him in the trap. He's hanging upside down. He grabs at his head just like he did, just like the paramedic did at the end of H2O. And then she has to make sure, and it's just stupid. I just can't buy into that. Laurie is not a stupid character by any means. She's always been kind of like the smart protagonist in the Halloween franchise. So her death is incredibly stupid. How she falls for that, and then she goes over the edge and she gets stabbed and falls after kissing Michael and saying, "I'll see you in hell." It's just a weak way for Laurie Strode to go out and a very stupid way for her to go out. And then there's the rest of the movie. So we all know about Busta Rhymes and his glorious lines. We all know about some of the stupidity of the characters, and some of the stuff that happens in the movie. I would say that on the positive side of it, right, the idea of doing a reality show inside the Myers house, what makes for, if it was done right, it could have been a very interesting concept. And I think on the positive side of Resurrection, it at least makes the movie kind of stand apart from all the other sequels before it. It has its own flavor. It's just it wasn't executed as well as it could have been, but at the same time, at least they tried to do something a little different. They didn't just try to copy John Carpenter's movie and make the same thing, but with just different characters and bigger effects and gore and stuff like that. So there's that. I also like the score from Danny Lux. That's pretty good. I think the mask looks better than the mask, plural, from H2O. The actor, I think that was his name, Brad Loree. He does better as Michael Myers than Chris Durand, I think. But overall, the movie has too many flaws, and I can't buy into the logic that they're trying to sell. So, Halloween Resurrection is number 10 on my list. It's my least favorite Halloween film. It's the one I probably watched the least out of all of them. It's not entirely so unwatchable that I can't ever watch it again. If I do marathon them, yeah, I'll probably put it in and have a good laugh with it. So it is number 10. All right, coming in at number 9 is Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers. So there are aspects of this movie I like, but overall, it is one of my least favorite Halloween movies, and it's definitely my least favorite in what is known as the Thorn trilogy, which I consider to be the Loomis saga, which is 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. So Halloween 5, first and foremost, it feels very flat. It's a very flat movie. It feels very made for TV, and it just, there's a lot about it that doesn't work, and I think it really comes down to the director, who not only didn't know the Halloween franchise, but he didn't really seem to care. And that is very evident with some of the locations, such as the Myers house, which is not even close to being believable as being the Myers house. And it's a it's a great looking house, a great location, and having that house added for it. Having that house made it so that they had that pretty cool scene where Jamie is in the she's in the what is it, the dumbwaiter, is that what it's called? It's a pretty cool scene, and they could have just fixed that. It could have just been any random house. It didn't have to be the Myers house. But there's that. There's the obvious, the cops and the cop music. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what Alan Howarth was thinking. Um, but it was really goofy. Um, my biggest complaint with Halloween 5 is actually Dr. Loomis. So Dr. Loomis is one of my favorite characters in horror. He's one of my favorite protagonists of horror. And I don't like asshole Loomis at all. And he was an asshole in this movie. He was uh, he seemed very physically and mentally abusive towards Jamie. He was he just was not likable at all, and it was a shame to see him like that. Now, I do have some friends who do like Halloween 5, actually, surprisingly, more than Halloween 4. And, they try to explain to me, this is a tired Loomis. This is Loomis at the end of his rope. This is Loomis who's very desperate and willing to try anything because he's getting older and he has yet to find a way to put an end to Michael Myers. And I can see that, but that's just not Dr. Loomis to me. To me, Loomis is defined mainly. The thing that I think of the most when it comes to Dr. Loomis is his line in Halloween 4 at the gas station when he sees Michael in the diner aspect of the gas station and he tries to plead with him. Please, Michael, leave those people in peace. If you want another victim, take me. That's Loomis defined to me. Someone who, even with like 1 and 2, he was constantly kind of being accused of letting Michael out. No one really believed him when he talked about Michael, and everyone seemed to kind of underestimate the whole situation. But Dr. Loomis was always there. He knew Michael. He knew the potential that Michael had for the violence that he could commit. And Dr. Loomis did everything he could to get people to listen, but no one listened to him. He was someone he's sort of like, I don't know how to put it. He's just like this hero who's fighting numerous obstacles, including everyone who gets in his way. Because everyone underestimates the whole situation. They underestimate Michael Myers. Because they believe he's just a man, and Dr. Loomis knows better. So having Loomis kind of take this turn where he's kind of screaming in Jamie's face, kind of shaking her, using her for bait at the end, it's just not the Loomis I like at all. I can't get into that. So that's probably my biggest complaint out of everything. And then there's also the fact that apparently the filmmakers, they realized at some point that they needed to add stuff to the movie because the movie seemed to not quite work. So they added the extra mystery by adding the Man in Black and by adding the thorn symbol on the wrist. And a huge problem with that is they came up with that idea, but they had no idea of where that was going to go. They just said, well, let the next people figure it out. So they really kind of they painted the franchise into a corner by including these big things, because those weren't just small things that you could just kind of brush off. Sure, there's other ways that I think different writers could take them, and probably not as extreme. But what they did when they did Halloween 6 was they just kind of fully embraced it for some reason. I'm not gonna totally take the people behind Halloween 6 off the hook for the whole cult thing. But the Halloween 5 crew were really responsible for the franchise going in that direction, and they just did it without even knowing where to possibly take it. So they kind of really fucked the franchise pretty hard, and they didn't even buy it dinner first. So yeah, the movie, I have tons of problems with the movie, but there are some good things into it. So I think there are some aspects where visually it's got a good horror vibe to it. I particularly like the scene with Tina and her. She believes it's her boyfriend Mike, but it's actually Michael. When they're in the car, I think that's a really awesome sequence, really great tense moment, and it's actually always kind of fun to watch. It's just neat seeing Michael in a different mask. It's kind of I like their little I like the interactions. I like the way he kind of moves his eyes to look at her. I think that's a really cool scene. Um, and I always get a kick out of it too. Actually, how Michael kills Mike and how he gets his attention by taking that garden utensil and slamming it into his vehicle and scratching the fuck out of it. Um, After we get to see how sort of like possessive and obsessive he is over his car. It always makes me chuckle. Um, yeah, so that's uh, those are a couple things that I like about it. Now, I hate to go back to a negative after transition into the positives, but I just remembered that one of the points that I wanted to make was the mistake they made of killing off Rachel, because Rachel was actually a really well built character in Halloween 4. She was very likable, and Ellie Cornell really she gave a pretty good performance, and it was she was a good character, as a I guess step sibling of Jamie and as a protector of Jamie, and the fact that they kind of just brushed her off in favor of this new character Tina, who was very annoying. It just doesn't. It just didn't seem right to me, especially given the fact of how much Jamie had like this emotional attachment to Tina, and particularly with the way that Tina died at the end, right? So Tina dies sacrificing herself for Jamie, and it almost kind of feels like it should have been a bigger emotional moment. I know it's a slasher franchise. Uh, does it really need powerful scenes or emotional moments? However, I would argue though that if it was Rachel throughout the entire movie, and it was Rachel who died just before the third act, sacrificing herself to save Jamie, I think that would have been a really great moment. It would have been a really earned moment. Instead of just killing her off in the beginning, kill her off at that moment towards the end, and having her do so by sacrificing herself for young Jamie. I think that would have been a really cool moment, and it's a really big missed opportunity. But that's what you get when you have a rush job of a movie. Um, they should have taken their time a little bit more. They should have been a little bit more selective of who they hired to direct. They should have solidified the script before they began, because there's aspects of it that are really good, and then there's just a whole other side of it which really drags it down. So Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, is number 9 for those reasons. Coming in at number 8 is Rob Zombie's Halloween 1. Now, I know that most people actually, for the most part, would put Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 below Halloween 1. But to me, they're almost at the same level. I do find Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, there's just maybe a little bit more to it that I like now than I did originally. But Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, I like the movie. I think it was nice and refreshing to have a more dangerous feeling horror movie in the Halloween franchise again. After, if you really kind of look at Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, if you look at how safe they feel, there's no real danger to them. They're sort of a product of their time in the post Scream era. They're very polished, and they just, there's no tension to them. I don't think. I think it's all superficial in the tension that they build up in those movies. So having Rob Zombie kind of bring back this really gritty, I mean, the franchise has never really been gritty, but bringing in this gritty kind of horror vibe and kind of making Michael terrifying again is very appealing for the movie. There's aspects of it that I really like and aspects I don't. What I don't like about it is the dialogue, and that's a big problem with most of Rob Zombie's movies. Is the dialogue can be a little over the top. It can be a little too much. You know, I don't think he's found kind of a right balance he hasn't found the right balance with the characters that he creates. And the way this movie starts off in the Myers house, and you see Ronnie, and there's that whole trashy interaction, it's overkill. It's very much overkill, and it's really annoying. And it's one of those things where if I put the movie in, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? Because it's just a little too much. Sometimes I have to skip forward. Now, I do have to say something as far as remakes go. So I applaud remakes that try to do something different instead of just kind of copy the same formula that came before. So not saying that this movie that Rob Zombie's Halloween is in the same league with any of the movies I'm about to list. But for the sake of an example of what I mean by the remakes I really like, are remakes like, for example, John Carpenter's Thing, which I know you could probably argue is a readaptation more than a remake, okay? But then there's also Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. Okay, again, readaptation versus remake. The Fly, David Cronenberg's The Fly. Brian De Palma's Scarface with Al Pacino. That's a really good remake, and there's other examples too. But what I like about these remakes is that they take the sort of like the essence of the story, but then they do something different with them. They kind of make them their own. The filmmakers kind of bring their own voice to them. And that's what I feel like Rob Zombie was doing here. So with Rob Zombie, he wasn't doing The Shape. He was doing The Psychopath. He was doing Halloween from a different lens. There isn't that mystery. There isn't that, supernatural question lingering. We get a very distinct answer as to why Michael becomes this massive serial killer, and that's because home life, basically. His real father was dead, which presumably probably got him to be a little more fascinated with death itself, which led to him, I guess, conducting his little death experiments of sorts on animals and photographing. I can't speak. And all that, and then of course, then you got to add in the picked on at school. His mom is working at the Rabbit and Red Lounge as a exotic dancer. His stepfather is very abusive, emotionally and definitely physically. You can kind of tell. And so Michael becomes a product of his environment, and that's why he becomes what he becomes. And that's a different take, and I kind of appreciate the fact that Rob Zombie actually went into that direction, because I don't know if having someone just try to mimic John Carpenter's film would even work, because it would clearly just be a mimic of John Carpenter's film. It would feel cheap, almost like the Psycho remake and the Cabin Fever remake, where it's just the same script, but they don't do much different, and it makes it useless. So that's the aspect I like of it, and going with that. So what I found interesting was, after Michael killed Judith, her boyfriend, and Ronnie, um, there's the whole thing where Michael is at Smith's Grove and you see his interactions with younger Dr. Loomis. I think that's really fascinating, and I wish that was explored a little bit more. Instead, the movie kind of feels like it's like two movies kind of crammed into one, because it transitions very suddenly um, into more of a remake of John Carpenter's film, a much more condensed remake where you're taking John Carpenter's hour and a half film and making it 45 minutes, and is, just with more violence, more gore, and but there's aspects of it that I like. I just think overall, it the dialogue is just a little too much, and I feel like, and also like what I just said a few minutes ago, that it does feel sort of odd. It feels like two movies crammed into one. So that's why it just edged out Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And with that said, coming in at number 7 is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which is it's a fan favorite, isn't it, guys? Isn't it? No? Yeah, no, this is one that I see a lot of people rank as the worst, even worse than Resurrection most of the time. So Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, the thing with Rob Zombie is I don't think he's entirely a bad filmmaker. I think he just um, I just wish that he got some help with the scripting process, because with Halloween 2 he does have like a nugget of brilliance with it, with the fact that he tries to handle a more psychological take on the characters, where we see the sort of the after effects of how the events of the first film really affected these characters, and how they have changed since then. And I don't feel like it was explored quite as much as it could have been, especially with the relationship between Laurie and Annie, which I feel like he did a really fascinating thing with, by sort of switching their characteristics, that because of the events of the first one, Annie became more of a shut in, she became more of a good girl, whereas Laurie, having lost her, what she knew as her parents, having lost uh, Linda, and knowing that Annie was her, and just with all the trauma of what happened, that she kind of became more of a free spirit. And I think that's really interesting, because it does switch their characteristics, and that's something that could have been explored more. And again, I know it's a slasher franchise, they don't have to be deep. Some fans just want the slashing, and I get that. I'm not saying it's the best way to go, but it's just I can't help myself when I see these opportunities of really good, strong character moments, and sort of strong, like, psychological moments that could be explored, and think, ah, if they did something with that, this movie would be way better. But does it work for? Would it work for any fan? If they did it the way that I want, probably not. I'm well aware of that. But yeah, and again, Rob Zombie with his dialogue, man, it's awful. Um, I feel like I hated his treatment of Dr. Loomis. Again, I do not like asshole Loomis, and I don't like, the idea of Loomis, I guess, sort of coming to terms with the fact that he was right in sort of an I told you so type of way. I don't like that. I don't like that he became an arrogant asshole. I don't like that they really kind of really went heavy on the whole thing where he's just trying to get famous and make money off of Michael and the tragedy of Haddonfield. I don't like that. I like the Loomis that his intentions are good, and I feel like that Malcolm McDowell's character, even in Rob Zombie's Halloween, was still that good character. He was still that person that people didn't listen to, the one that people underestimated, and his intentions were good and noble. And then, because of the events of that movie, he suddenly becomes an asshole. It doesn't work for me. And his redemption moment was a little too late. So I just didn't care for that at all. The speaking of the dialogue, the dialogue between the two coroners in the van before they hit the cow. Fuck, that's rough. That's rough. That's rough dialogue right there. Probably not needed. I don't think everyone in Haddonfield needs to be a piece of trash. The Strodes, Dee Wallace and I can't remember the actor's name, the guy that played Mr. Strode. I can't remember his first name, the character's first name. In Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, they were surprisingly well written. They weren't really a trash family either, and it just gave me hope that Rob Zombie could tell stories of other types of characters that aren't totally the Firefly family. So, yeah, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, I think it's pretty interesting visually. It's pretty unique as a Halloween movie in terms of visuals. I'm gonna come out and say it. I don't care about the whole white horse thing. It doesn't bother me like it bothers most people. A lot of people seem pretty offended by it. We all know that he did it so he could get his wife into the movie. But when I watched the movie, it doesn't bother me whatsoever. I think it's kind of interesting to see from Michael's perspective, this sort of like this fantasy world of him and his family. I think that was a really cool thing. So, the white horse thing doesn't bother me at all. I don't care. Don't give a shit. I don't understand why people are so upset by it, but people are upset by it. Yeah, so Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, I think there's some value in it, but it's just not quite as good as it could have been. I think there's a lot of potential with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 if you really kind of look, if you really peel back the layers. There's quite a bit to it, and it could have been really good. But it's at number 7 for a reason. Coming in at number 6 is Halloween H2O. So Halloween H2O was a movie that I really liked a lot when it first came out. I actually saw it in the theater when it first came out, and back then I was a chicken shit. I've seen horror movies before. I grew up with Child's Play 2 and 3 and Pet Sematary 1 and 2 and some other stuff that used to play on USA all the time. But when it came to the Halloween franchise, I was scared. I think it had to do with the music. My mom was a big Halloween fan. She had all the VHS tapes, and she would watch them often, and there was just something about them that made me scared. So when H2O came out, I was 15. I was doing it was August of 98, and I was doing some like part-time work through a summer youth program in my town. So I'd work from like 7 to noon. So I got out at noon one day. Someone gave me a ride over to the movie theater because my dad was working there as a projectionist. And because it was August, there wasn't really much out. And one of the options was Halloween H2O. And even though I was scared of the Halloween franchise, I said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. I went in and I loved it. I had a good time from beginning to end, and I absolutely loved the ending. Left, I went home and I was just telling everyone about the movie. I think I spoiled the ending for like everyone in my neighborhood, um, but it's cool. It's cool. Um, but I have to say that over time, it doesn't quite hold up as well. It is definitely a product of its time. It's definitely a post Scream era film. Like I said, it early on when I was talking about Rob Zombie's movie, feeling very dangerous again. The H2O and Resurrection movies felt very safe and very, yeah, they just felt safe. There's no real tension to them, and really the whole middle of H2O is kind of vanilla. I think it has a strong opening scene. It was great to see Marion Chambers back again. And the whole third act I thought was fantastic. The whole thing where Laurie turns the tables on Michael and hunts him down. Right up to her beheading him, which I think would have been the perfect ending to the franchise. I think having Resurrection follow that was kind of a disservice. Um, but H2O is a movie that I like, but it's just it's a movie that I like less and less the more I watch it. It's a fast paced movie. I can have fun with it. I don't hate it, so I will watch it. But it's definitely not one of my favorites, just because of the fact that they tried too hard to make a Scream movie instead of trying to make a Halloween movie, which is kind of a shame, especially when you're doing a Halloween movie. So, H2O is good. It's just it's not as good as it. I don't consider it to be as good as I used to. Let's just put it that way. Coming in at number 5 is Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, and I included both cuts here, the producer's cut and the theatrical cut, because in my opinion, there is no such thing as the perfect cut of this movie. I think there's strengths and weaknesses to both sides. I'd say if I had to choose sort of to Frankenstein this movie with both cuts, I would probably use the first 2/3 of the producer's cut, because there's a little bit more to it. There's definitely a lot more with Dr. Loomis and Wynn. And then I would take the third act of the theatrical cut, because I feel it's more exciting and it's more climactic. So I think the ending that they had for the producer's cut made sense with the producer's cut, but at the same time, it's kind of bland. It's kind of a bland way to end a Halloween movie. Whereas at least when you get to the theatrical cut, it's everything from Michael taking out all the cultists in the operating room, to the whole chase throughout Smith's Grove, to just the scene where Tommy beats him with a pipe. I feel like it's definitely more of a satisfying ending when you go to see a slasher movie. So that's kind of how I would. I guess that's how I would prefer the movie to be. And there's still flaws with it, but I have to say I love this movie. Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers is badass. I've always liked this movie. I really like Paul Rudd as Tommy. I thought his quirks were kind of worked for the movie. Kind of really sold the character for me. I liked Marion Hagen as Kara Strode. I thought she was a very likable character. I liked. Obviously, I love. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Loomis, as I've said before, and seeing Donald Pleasance one last time. unfortunately, because he died shortly after the production was completed. But seeing him play Dr. Loomis one more time and seeing him play the Loomis that I like, um, it's very rewarding because I don't like the way that the character became with Part 5. So, kind of seeing him sort of back to just kind of being the good man with good intentions, it was it's nice to have that final performance because I think if I remember correctly, I believe like originally they were gonna go with Loomis dying of the stroke at the end of Halloween 5. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me. But it would have been a shame if that was the last we saw of Loomis. So at least we got a little bit of a redemption with this character one final time. So yeah, Curse of Michael Myers. It's a really fun movie. It's probably the more energetic Halloween movies out there. I think it's a blast to watch. Not a perfect movie. You know, you can't really put it next to Halloween 1 and compare um, because it's not even trying. I don't think. I think it's definitely the the product of its time. I guess I know I've said that about other movies, but it's sort of like the early to mid '90s, slasher, where it's definitely more about the violence and the gore. But it's good. I like it. I like it a lot, and I love the mask. I love Michael's mask, and I think it's probably one of my favorites. Not quite as good as the first mask, which also was Halloween 2 mask. Definitely better than 4 and 5. Definitely better than all the masks combined that they use for H2O. Better than masks from Resurrection. I would say I like the mask from Curse better than both of the Rob Zombie masks. Halloween 2018, probably on par with it. But yeah, Curse of Michael Myers. I love it. It's a great movie. Coming in number 4 is Halloween 2018. It's a movie that I was really high on when it first came out, but in the time since, it's kind of slid down. Not quite as down as H2O has, but it's. I feel like the movie sort of kind of peaks when it gets to the death of Vicky and Dave. I think it kind of falls apart after that. It seemed like it was on a good path. It was on a good streak, and then once it got to that point, it just kind of felt rushed. But I like it. I like the idea of kind of ignoring the sequels. I know that upsets a lot of people. Um, I don't think it's really necessary, to be honest with you, because I mean, if you look at Laurie Strode from Halloween 2018, it would have made more sense for her to be the Laurie Strode from Halloween 1 and 2, because of the excessiveness of Michael's rampage, I guess, from 1 and 2, and just everything that she went through between the two movies. I think it would just made more sense for her to be the character that she was in 2018 if she went through the entire night as depicted in Halloween 1 and 2. And it would have been kind of cool too because, if you think about the ending of Halloween 2, Dr. Loomis goes to hand her a gun, and she shakes her head no, she doesn't want a gun. And eventually she has to take it after Loomis is wounded, and she shoots Michael with it. She shoots him in both eyes. And you could kind of, you could take away as that is the moment where Laurie kind of had a appreciation for weapons, and that's what kind of inspired her to kind of build up her arsenal. That moment where she had a gun, she was able to defend herself, and she started preparing since then. I think that would have made a lot of sense, but it doesn't really hurt the movie for me for Halloween 2 not to be included. I think it's again, I think it's a good movie. it's it doesn't quite hold up to the way that I first felt about it. Um, I would definitely say the biggest problem with it is there's kind of a lack of stalking in it. He follows the podcasters for a couple seconds here and there. There's a couple minor things. I mean, but there's no stalking to it, and I think the whole stalking aspect is what made John Carpenter's movie really effective. But I enjoy it. I think it's a good movie. Coming in at number three is Halloween 4, the um, Return of Michael Myers, and it's a damn shame that's at number three. I feel guilty for the fact that it's at number three. In a way, I feel like it should be higher on the list, but it's not. It's really hard because it's one of my favorite sequels. To be honest with you, there's I think if there's anything I could say negative about the movie is the body pattern on George Wilbur and the mask. And the mask you can kind of explain away as it's a cheap knockoff mask. It's like what you would find online or in a store. It's that knockoff brand. We see it all the time. The knockoff Michael Myers mask, the knockoff Jason Voorhees hockey mask. And Michael went to the random drugstore and he just kind of grabbed the mask that was similar, but it was the knockoff version. So you could make sense of it, of him wearing that mask, despite the mask being really shitty. Um, but other than that, man, it's a great movie. You know, so many people have said it, so it kind of feels cheap for me to say it. But the opening sequence, the opening credits, really definitely sets the atmosphere. It definitely has that fall vibe to it. Fantastic stuff right there. Dr. Loomis, in my opinion, is at his peak in this movie. He's, again, my favorite character in the franchise, and I just absolutely love him. Uh, you know, Jamie and Rachel are really likable characters, and both are performed well. I think Danielle Harris did really well. I'm not the biggest fan of child actors, but she did really well. I even like Brady. He was stupid, with what he did, but that's what teenagers do. I mean, even adults do that type of stuff too, but I feel like he kind of redeemed himself a little bit with the way that he went out, with the way that he took on Michael, which was actually a cool scene. I really like that scene. And I like I like Bo Starr as Sheriff Meeker. I actually prefer Sheriff Meeker over Sheriff Brackett, to be honest with you. I think that's a great character, and it's a shame that he wasn't in Halloween 6. I think it would have been great if he was in Curse of Michael Myers. Even though he allegedly died at the police station, they could have worked around it. But yeah, Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers is, I think it's one of my favorite sequels. I think it's one of the best sequels in the franchise, and it almost feels like a disservice to put it at number three, but I can't put it any higher. But it's great. I love it. I definitely love it. Um, and fuck off, Wade. I love it. So coming at number two, this is the split. This is going to be the suffix of 2A and 2B. 2A is going to be Halloween 2 from 1981. That is my favorite Halloween sequel. I feel like it's the ultimate Halloween sequel. And I know that when John Carpenter made the first Halloween, he was not thinking of a sequel. It was going to be just like any other John Carpenter movie, right? John Carpenter is not a sequel guy. If you look at his filmography, it shows that. He's only directed one sequel, and that was Escape from LA, which is practically a remake. But obviously he was obligated by contract to do Halloween 2 as far as writing and producing, because he originally made a deal with Irwin Yablans of what was then known as Compass International. I think it transitioned to Trancas after, but for The Fog, and it was a verbal agreement, and then John Carpenter made a multi-picture deal with AFCO Embassy, and one of those projects was The Fog, and so in order to avoid getting sued, John had to take on the write-in and producing duties of Halloween 2. And, it's got its flaws to it, but I really love the type of sequels like this, where, sort of like Frankenstein from 1931 and The Bride of Frankenstein from 1935, or Superman the movie from 78 and Superman 2 from, I believe, 81. Those type of movies where it's like it's like two halves of one story. I like those type of sequels, so I like the fact that this one picks up immediately where the first one left off. It kind of ups the ante. There's a whole new location. I think the hospital setting is really cool. Yeah, it's just it's a really good scene. And Dr. Loomis, of course, is awesome in it. Just really good stuff, and I think it had a really good ending too. I think John Carpenter kind of ended that story pretty damn well with the end of Halloween 2. At the end of the day, Halloween 2 is my favorite Michael Myers sequel. I think it's the ultimate Michael Myers sequel. To be, on the other hand, is going to be Halloween 3: The Season of the Witch, which is, I would say, one of my favorite Halloween sequels, period. That's why I kind of wanted to pair it up, because I didn't feel like it was fair to say Halloween 3 is better than Halloween 2 when I feel very strongly, pretty equally about both films. Halloween 3 was that experimental film. I mean, if you look at the genre and what it was like back in the early 80s, slashers in particular and sequels were just kind of becoming a new thing. They weren't really in existence. But of course, Halloween inspired the Friday 13th franchise, and then the Friday 13th franchise ended up inspiring what the Halloween franchise was to become. And at the time that Halloween 3 came out, I believe they were already on Friday 13th Part 3, and Jason Jason returned from Part 2, and they were kind of really building up that unstoppable killer type of thing. And audiences, I think, really were reacting to that. They were taking that in. And so I think there was kind of an expectation. I don't know. I haven't really looked into the marketing of Halloween 3, so I can't really tell you if they did a good enough job of letting people know that it was a new original story. But I understand where they were coming from, because in the mind of John Carpenter, he killed off Michael Myers. That story was at an end. The unstoppable killer thing wasn't really heard of at the point that they went into production on Halloween 3. It was kind of becoming a thing at the same time. And so naturally the idea was for him to sort of be actively involved with Halloween as a franchise, despite not really being a sequel guy, and doing these different tales all themed on Halloween. And could it have worked? I don't know. Some people say, yeah, if it was Halloween 2 and they did that, that'd be one thing, but because there's two Michael Myers movies, I don't know about that argument, because even though Carpenter's first movie was not intended to have a sequel, there was no setup for a sequel. Again, see John Carpenter's filmography. Most of his movies end pretty ambiguous and almost open-ended, but they're not sequel bait. I feel like Halloween 2 gave John a reason to do something he's actually very rarely done, and that was give a definitive ending. And he did it, and that allowed them to then move forward with different Halloween-themed sequels. So, But that said, I really love Halloween 3. I love the Invasion of the Body Snatchers feel to it. I love the story. I love the characters. Especially Dr. Chalice. So Dr. Chalice on paper should be the most unlikable character out of the entire franchise. Constantly bailing on his kids, lying to his ex-wife about taking his kids and grabbing a six-pack of beer and hitting the road with this young woman he just met. Um, it should be a character we call a piece of shit, but there's just something about Tom Atkins and his portrayal of that character, and with the story and the mystery of it, where it's just I forgive it, I guess. Um, but yeah, and I love the ending. The ending to Halloween 3 gets me every time. I just love that type of ending, where it's definitely ambiguous enough where it's like it's implying something bad's going to happen, but there's maybe a glimmer of hope. Maybe he did get the broadcast station to stop it. But yeah, no, I love Halloween 3. I think it's a great movie. I think it's underrated. I know a lot of people have come around on it since. I mean, I grew up believing that Halloween 3 was a piece of shit. It's one that I didn't watch for a long time. My mom had all the VHS tapes of the Halloween franchise, except for part 3. And I've heard from many people that Halloween 3 sucks because it has nothing to do with Michael Myers. And then when I watched it, I went to the video store and I rented the VHS. And I'm like, what the fuck are people talking about? This is this is a very entertaining movie. Um, just because it doesn't have to do with Michael Myers, I don't care. Uh, because it has Halloween in the title, I don't care. People say, it'd been better if it was served as just Season of the Witch. It's fine with Halloween 3 in the title. Um, because I don't care. It could have worked. I think it's, but, I'm glad that people are coming around on it. I still see every day, every single day in these Halloween fan groups. There's a post or two a day about how Halloween 3 sucks. Um, some people have legit reasons they don't legitimately like the story or the characters. That's understandable. And there's people who don't like it just because it doesn't have anything to do with Michael, which I feel like is a really stupid argument to make. Yeah, so Halloween 2 is 2A, Halloween 3 is 2B. I love them both. I love them both equally. Coming in at number 1 is John Carpenter's Halloween. Uh, fuck. What's there? This movie is a masterpiece. It's art. If you look at just everything from John's direction to Dean Cundy's cinematography to the deliberate slow pace of the editing, just the music cues, just the way the camera lingers, the mythology set up between Michael and Dr. Loomis, and the way Dr. Loomis talks about Michael as something much more than just a normal human being. There's just so much to John Carpenter's Halloween that's just fantastic all across the board. I love that movie. It's just, there's so many positive things that you could point out about that movie. Just, it's expertly directed, in my opinion. It's just so well crafted. Some of the dialogue isn't the greatest, if you totally know what I mean. But it's hands down, it's one of John Carpenter's best films. It should be in the top 5 of any ranking of John Carpenter's filmography. Great movie. So, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because we all know that John Carpenter's Halloween is the best in the franchise. We know it. Come on, don't lie to yourself. So that is my ranking of the Halloween franchise, from worst to best. I love this franchise. I cannot wait to see Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. I can't wait to redo this ranking. But I love this franchise a lot. And even though there's movies that are sort of like towards the bottom of the list, it doesn't mean I hate them. I can watch any of these movies anytime. There's just some that I just prefer to rewatch more than others. So that's that. So anyway, How do you feel about the Halloween franchise? How would you rank them? Do you agree with my ranking or do you disagree with my ranking? Um, Put a comment. Write down your ranking. It'd be kind of cool to talk about it. And if you're gonna get pissy about my ranking, I don't care. I don't give a fuck. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you like it, a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Be sure to subscribe. That'd be kind of cool. And hit the bell for notifications, and don't forget to eat your vegetables. Don't forget to pet your dog, and wash your hands with soap and water. And don't forget to, if you know someone named Wade, don't forget to say "fuck off, Wade." Okay. So my name is Seth. This has been BrundleFly's rankings and reviews, and yeah. Have a good night, and whatever the fuck you do. See ya.